you're sat at your desk, you're doing some stuff, your phone goes and you answer the phone. This is Fred. Fred, look, I'll be completely honest with you. We haven't spoken before. I suppose, therefore, you could construe this as a cold call. And I don't know if by saying that, that actually makes you wish to end the call straight away, or to allow me 30 seconds to explain the reason I am wishing to speak to you quite specifically. Now, I'm giving you the option there to either end the call straight away or to allow me 30 seconds. And I would say that perhaps 75% of people would say, okay, 30 seconds. I now go from that opener to what I would call the hook. So preparing for this call, what I have done is got 2 or 3 issues that typically Fred, in his engineering business, is quite possibly likely to have experienced, or might experience, or is actually experiencing.
You're listening to the Sales Today podcast, and I'm your host, Fred Copestake. On this podcast, we explore how sales professionals can develop a modern approach to winning business, the application of virtual selling techniques, how to create meaningful business relationships, and much more. Why not take our free collaborative selling scorecard to see how your sales approach suits today's environment? You'll find a link in the show notes. And welcome to this episode of the Sales Today podcast, where I'm delighted to be joined by Nick Jeins. Nick is a cold caller with 30 years experience, who now does it and coaches it. And so firstly, Nick, welcome, sir.
Thank you, Fred. Welcome.
So wanted to talk to you about both the doing and the coaching, actually. I'd like you to kind of merge those two things you do.
Okay.
And help us get our heads around how do we do this stuff in an engineering environment. You up for that?
Understood. I am.
Excellent. So your mission, should you wish to, I can't remember how you do it. So let's position it as, I'm a sales director, and I'm coming to you and saying, Nick, I need you to make some calls. My team aren't doing enough outreach. We've not got enough prospects. Can you do these calls for me? Can you sort of take us through how you would set up to do that, and then the kind of the dynamics of the call itself?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing is to understand why the sales director has contacted me. Now, you've mentioned very briefly that they need more leads. There's not enough outreach. So let's try to understand really exactly what's behind that outreach. Once we can identify perhaps that there are some gaps, there might be just not enough profit coming through the business, or there might be perhaps let's say a bottleneck in terms of the pipeline. Outreach is going to be something that they feel is going to help them. So we've discussed this, and we then decided that maybe it's a good idea to sit down and consider precisely what the offer is, to understand where their prospects might be and why their prospects might then be interested.
Okay.
So typically, go on.
Let me just stop you there, because we've already said quite a lot of stuff there. The first thing is, I've come to you and I've said, I need you to do some calls. I need to do some outreach. You've actually just gone, whoa. Let's back up a bit. Let's check that actually is the solution you need and you require.
Yes.
Which is good selling. Yeah. Part of you is probably saying, you probably need to train your sales team. That's a different conversation. We'll do that on another day. But you're backing up and going, okay, yes, it does appear that that's what we need to do. Now we're into outreach is the thing, offer, prospects. Talk me through that then, what we're doing with considering that.
Okay, so typically there is going to be an absolute ideal prospect for this business. And what I would want to understand is that my potential client, this sales director, is going to know who that prospect is going to be, where they're going to sit in the marketplace, what kind of a level of seniority, for example. and just why they are going to be the ideal prospect. Now, I would hope that they would understand who they're going to look like and who they're going to be, but sometimes they don't, Fred. And this is where the issues do come in, where we then need to find out who they're going to be and why, more importantly.
I would say that's absolutely fair. Sometimes, I would say quite often, particularly if you're selling products, because the answer you get, and look, we're going to be vastly generalizing here, but the answer you get and what's the offer, they'll start telling you about the product. That's what will happen in this world quite often. And you'll be thinking, aha, right, so therein lies a bit of an issue because we're talking about the wrong thing straight away.
Yeah, and typically, if you ask questions of that sort of nature, as you say, it's then a feature-led response that you get. So it's all, we do this, we do this, we do this, this is why it's good, and so on and so forth. And that's really not what I'm looking for. So I need to dig down and then understand more, obviously by the questioning.
Yeah.
So if we move ahead from that point, I've now got a base understanding of what their prospect is going to look like. It's then a question of how and why do we, I suppose, go out to that marketplace and to that prospect, and to make the calls that I'm going to make on behalf of this sales director effective, and to be able to engage with these people.
Okay.
And go on.
No, carry on.
I was going to say the engagement is the crucial part of that call at the very start of it.
Okay, so that we're now into the call. The engagement is you've interrupted somebody. They're not sat waiting for the call, are they?
No, nobody's sat
Can't
waiting
wait
for
for
a
you to
call.
call me and talk to you about these things. The how and why bit. So this is where a lot of the magic will happen, or it's certainly going to help you as you get into the engagement, because you've gone away from the we, I, product, feature, into this is stuff that's going on in your world, or this is a problem you've probably got, issue that might be being experienced, an opportunity that they're missing out on. That's what you're looking to try to identify in that how and why questioning with the people you're going to do the work for, because that's going to set you up with your content for the call, correct?
Yes, and it's vital that the person I'm working on behalf of understands that too. So they need to know that they have, let's say, a solution that they provide to their ideal prospect that's actually going to make an impact, a difference in their day-to-day business. If we go back again and we mentioned the feature-led spiel, let's say, if that's all it's going to be, that's not going to do the job at all. So my job is to understand the issues that they provide the solution to for the problems that their prospects are suffering from.
Okay, and again, picking up what you were saying there, so we're moving away from the product into the solution. Solutions are given to problems, but you also said it's got to have significant impact or make a big enough difference.
Yeah.
Because I could be saying, "Oh, I've got these wonderful solutions," and it's like, "Well, good for you," but they don't. The problem I have isn't big enough for me to do anything about it. Then mild frustrations, actually. Not a problem.
Exactly.
A problem for me is this. That's what's getting my attention. You're talking about frustration. You ain't going to get through that.
No, indeed. So this is where the engagement has to happen. So all of that back work that we've both had, the person I'm working on behalf of, and myself by the questioning, is to try and understand precisely what is going to be relevant and what is going to make that impact in the world of the prospects that I'm going to be calling and speaking to and hopefully engaging with.
It's also the basis for the training curriculum you'll be giving to the sales team so that they can understand this and can do it on themselves.
Exactly. Just a very brief aside then with regards to that. It's very much the case that a lot of cold callers are just feature-led salespeople on the phone, and that just doesn't cut the mustard. It really needs to be understanding why that prospect is going to want to listen to them. So we're back to where we are now in terms of the calls that I'll be making.
back to problems, back to problem being big enough. And it's the problem they actually have, not the one you want them to have. Not would be great for you if they did have it. Do they actually sit there thinking this is making my situation worse? I don't like it. Or
Well,
maybe they're in a
that's
bad situation. They don't quite realize what it is, but they're feeling it.
precisely. They might not realize
Mm.
that. And perhaps they've never actually been questioned by somebody else about this. So I suppose if we go back 30 years when I started my cold calling, I had no idea that any of this was relevant or was important to the case. Clearly, after a few years of calling, you become a bit more experienced, a bit more wise. But having run businesses myself too, of course, my own business that I'm doing now, you know that you need to understand the real depth of the issue, perhaps that you didn't even realize. And if somebody is, let's say, questioning you about that, not necessarily confronting you about it, but actually listening and caring and wanting to understand, you're more likely to want to then share your frustrations, your problems with that person. And so that's my job. And I have to do all of that in a very, very short amount of time with somebody I've never met in my life before on a cold call.
Mm. And there's a skill in this, which we're gonna break that down. But yeah, it's funny you sort of say, 30 years ago, there's catalog. That's what you said.
Yeah.
Later. On you go, mate. I mean, not
Yeah,
even any product
exactly.
training. I mean, if you're lucky,
No,
you might
no,
have sat
no.
down and got brainwashed around the product. And then, of course, what you can talk about is that product. Did I say 30 years ago?
Yes, 30. Actually, it's probably
Mm,
about 35 years ago.
yeah, I'm thinking more that stuff's still happening. Brainwash
It's,
on the product, brainwash on how brilliant the company is. We've been around all this time. We've got all of these different facilities. We've got more offices in the Southern Hemisphere than anybody. So what?
it's
And of
all me,
course, so
me,
we're
me,
setting
isn't it?
people up to fail
Absolutely.
because that's what we're telling them is important, because that's what we like to hear about ourselves. So
Sure.
if you don't know, you've not been trained any other way, now go and make some phone calls. I suppose I better tell people about this because that's what I've been told. I've not been told how
What,
to sell.
when you and I started doing this cold calling business, as you say, you were thrown a catalog or the yellow pages, and it's just literally rip out a page and go through it. And that nowadays has been replaced with digital data. And so there are SDRs, there are cold callers nowadays that are going into the industry with just the data list on their CRM and a phone system and told to get on with it. Products, as you say, they're giving a lot of us, me, I, but they haven't a clue about the people that they're going to be engaging with. Let me I'll say that differently, the people that they're going to be talking to, because the engagement, they have no idea how to do that.
Talking at.
Talking at, absolutely,
If
yeah.
we're going to correct ourselves, let's call it what it is.
And this is the reason why cold calling has this awful reputation of being something that is interrupting anybody's day, whether it's a business leader or whether it's a consumer in their home in the evening. It's interrupting because it's not relevant and it's annoying. And that's the difference between making a cold call that's received in a very positive matter and not.
Now let's think about this in the engineering space, where I
Mm,
think it is different because the people doing the calls are likely to be the ones which are taking ownership of the whole sales process. They might already know the customer, so it's a different opportunity within them,
sure.
or they would know the type of customer, and they've done the sort of stuff with others that they will end up talking about. So they should have a really good insight onto those problems when they start thinking about them like this and the reasons that people are buying, which isn't the shiny buttons and the functionality, it's the what they're getting from it. They're in a better position already to do a better cold call using some of the kind of engagement techniques you'll talk about in a minute, I'd say.
I think you're right. I think they're specialists in their industry. Firstly, that's a very important factor. But they're probably very well versed in speaking about what they do to the person that they're speaking to. So the two of them are not really having a conversation per se. They're sharing their
Yeah.
beliefs, their backgrounds, their experiences. So in the engineering sector, if somebody is cold calling and wishing to then get and engage with their prospects, of course they have all that background experience and knowledge, which is, I think, very, very positive. But what they need to understand is then how to ask questions in such a manner that's going to allow the person that they're speaking to, the prospect, to open up and to engage and to then talk about their business. At the end of the day, Fred, when on any cold call, if somebody is interested enough, they'll be more than happy to gush forth with their own business world to somebody that is listening to them. We all love to talk about ourselves and our lives and our experiences. And in a way, it's the art of the cold caller to allow that to happen with the prospect, is to get them to talk about their world.
Favorite subject, isn't it?
Uh,
Ourselves.
uh, of course.
Which is the problem when we end up talking about ourselves. The customers talk about themselves.
And that's honestly one of the nails sort of hit on the head, because a lot of cold callers do precisely that. It's all I, me, I, me. There's nothing about the you, the prospect. And it's all about the prospect. It can only be all about the prospect, because that's what we're trying to do, is to engage with them. So they understand now they have an option, perhaps for the solution to an issue that they didn't know that they could get rid of.
Yeah. Shine light on it, realize that it's there, realize there's something they can do about it. Yeah. Okay. Good. So there's some mindset stuff in here as to where our focus is. Let's. So I know you're desperate to get into the structure of the call, because this is your bag. Are we going to sit back to back and do ring ring? That's how you used to do training back in the day.
We did used to do that, absolutely. If you want, I don't mind at all.
No, but let's break down the sort of the structure flow of the call, because there are distinct things that you can hone in on and get right. Keep getting these things right, and the whole thing's going to come together very nicely.
Sure. Okay. I think the first thing to understand is that, as you quite correctly stated, nobody is sitting at their office desk waiting for a cold call. I think the general consensus of opinion is that people feel that it's an interruption into their working day, and that can be construed as the truth. But I think that perhaps it's the way that it's delivered that creates that interruption. So the very first thing that should come out of the mouth of the cold caller is something that allows the person who's picked up that phone to understand that it is in fact a cold call, but that the cold caller wants to speak to the prospect because there is something potentially quite relevant to their business industry and their world that might be of some engagement, interest, or information. And so the call itself is broken down into essentially three sectors. So the opener, which I'll come back to, then what I call the hook, and then the third thing is the questioning.
Mm-hmm.
So the opener, let's say I'm calling you, Fred. You're sat at your
Yep.
desk, you're doing some stuff, your phone goes, and you answer the phone. And you answer the phone. Hello, this is Fred. Fred, look, I'll be completely honest with you. We haven't spoken before. I suppose, therefore, you could construe this as a cold call. And I don't know if by saying that, that actually makes you wish to end the call straight away, or to allow me 30 seconds to explain the reason I am wishing to speak to you quite specifically. Now, I'm giving you the option there to either end the call straight away or to allow me 30 seconds. And I would say that perhaps 75% of people would say, okay, 30 seconds. I now go from that opener to what I would call the hook. So preparing for this call, what I have done is got 2 or 3 issues that typically Fred, in his engineering business, is quite possibly likely to have experienced, or might experience, or is actually experiencing. So I could say, Fred, typically I would speak to people like yourself who are suffering from 1, 2, 3 of these issues. We found that some of the people that we speak to are very happy with how it's all working out at the moment in time, and in fact haven't had any issues at all. But some of those are unfortunate enough to be suffering from them and have suffered from them. But I would imagine that you're probably going to tell me, Fred, that actually none of those are relevant in your business world, and you can't foresee that happening in the future. So I'm not telling you that you need to listen to me. What I am doing is giving you the option of you saying to me, well, actually, no, none of those are relevant, at which point I say, well, thank you very much indeed for your time. And we might have perhaps a very short and brief conversation about the business. Or they might say, well, actually, we have had number one or number two or number three issue happen. At which point I'll say something like, well, what happened and what was the cause, do you think? Is it something that you've now resolved? Well, and we start to get into maybe a business conversation. And my hook is to try and do precisely that, to engage the person I'm speaking to with relevancy.
Okay, good. So little things things I'm scribbling down here, not little at all. The preparation. So we're back to that back work, that stuff you've called, because you've got to be reasonably sure that those things that you're going to call out, problems, the challenges, the issues, concerns, are what's going on in their world. Yeah.
Exactly. So that takes me
Which is
straight
relevancy.
back.
That's what you're talking about. Yeah.
It takes me straight back to the conversation, the in-depth conversation, of course, I've had with that original sales director that I'm going to be calling on behalf of. They have told me the issues that they are likely to provide the solutions to for those prospects. So because I now understand precisely how my clients can help their potential clients, I have this bridge of relevancy.
Ooh, bridging into the where we're going.
Absolutely.
And why three? Why did you pick three elements?
I think one is too focused and is not likely to be relevant. People like a choice, but not too many choices. So really we're looking, and it could be two things, Fred. It could be five things, but ideally two or three issues tends to be something that most people would recognize at least. And then might have a
three
choice.
is a bit of a magic number. It's probably a whole episode around
Yeah.
around three magic number in presentations, in those kind of questions, in options pose. Yeah. Okay. And then can you just take us back over what you said, where it was something like, I imagine that these, what were the words? I imagine these
Yeah.
might
So
not.
I would say I've delivered the three issues, let's say. And at that point, I'd say, but Fred, you're probably going to tell me now that actually none of those are relevant and haven't ever been issues with you. So I'm asking a question in a way that will allow you, hopefully, to say, no, you're right, I haven't. And that is something that comes back frequently. And I'm glad to hear that because it means immediately to me, from the call point of view, that perhaps this is not quite the right kind of prospect, but I don't understand precisely why. So a little bit more questioning, I will find out. But essentially, I know that this is not likely to go much further. But if you do respond by saying, well, actually, the first issue that you mentioned is something that we have had problems with or we are suffering from at the moment. Now we're into the conversation about, well, tell me more about that.
Yep. Tell your, explain to me, describe, Ted.
Exactly.
Just before we go into that piece, what I noticed when you were just explaining these and you ended up playing the role, you slowed down and delivered really calmly and didn't actually try to speed up to get all those three things in before I put the phone down.
Now that's a confidence thing, and it's also an experience and wisdom thing, I suppose. But you're absolutely right, and we're getting into the sort of, I suppose, the scientific and the technicality side of cold calling. And clearly, you can hear I'm speaking quite quickly as I'm trying to explain it.
Yeah. And then when you were playing it, you slowed into cold call mode because it's in the muscle and it's in your memory. Yeah.
So it's very important to understand that if something is delivered to a complete stranger that has no idea who the heck you are, in a slow, considered manner, they're going to understand that you know what you're talking about. They're going to understand that actually this might be something that I need to hear because they're not like all the other cold callers and they're trying to rush it out and get it. So it's all quickly over because I've got something I wanted to speak to you specifically about, and this is part of it. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. And it's confidence. It's a whole, I mean, again, lots of reasons behind it, but I just wanted to highlight what was going on there. So would I be right? Oh, actually, no. That first thing you said, we do have a bit of an issue with that. Excellent. Well, we've got a best solution ever. Cutting edge,
Ah,
innovative, AI driven.
yes. So
Ah, you actually looked physically pained there.
that's it. Because now you've got perhaps a prospect that is suffering from some of the things that you can provide the solutions to. Yet, if you just now vomit all of your features and benefits, this is what we do, we're brilliant, we're number one in the market, da 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 da. How on earth is that going to benefit you? I mean, that doesn't mean a thing. What I now need to know is why are you having that problem? What has caused this problem? What have you done about this problem? And here's the biggie, I think, Fred, is are you in a position where you understand that this is something that you now need to address before it starts to have a really big negative impact on your business?
Yeah.
And by asking those questions, you're, and I hate this term, but it's all over LinkedIn, I suppose, is peeling back that onion. I call it, what you're doing is you are listening intently to the response. You're then countering that with another question that is very specific to that response. And the both of you are starting to go down that rabbit hole to understand how deep you need to go before this is something that surfaces and can be addressed in the light of day, let's say.
This is where trained engineers have a massive advantage over mere mortals or people who haven't got that mindset.
Sure,
I
sure.
mean, five whys. You could, it's not as elegant, but you could almost just sit there and go, why? Why?
Absolutely.
Why?
Yes.
Why? And in some cases, the elegance of the questioning doesn't matter too much. It's the thinking that you're trying to stimulate, isn't it? What about you? Oh, was my question brilliant? Oh, sorry, what did you say? Yeah, it's I just got to get you getting your head around it and you going, this is actually very useful. Pleased that you called. Shall we get together and talk more about this?
Yeah. So I suppose the psychology behind this is incredibly important because you've now got an individual that's talking about an issue that they've been suppressing, let's say, for
Mm.
quite some time. They haven't been called out about it per se, but what they have been is questioned about it. They understand that maybe the person that's questioning them is going like, they could be perhaps somebody that might really be able to help us. But now, and if you look at somebody physically when they're recounting issues or memory, their eyes will look in a different direction. Of course, we can't do that on the phone, but metaphorically, we can hear them almost. And they're thinking and recounting. So now they're in that depth of mind to recount those issues. And if you do the five whys, they're going to keep recounting and keep going digger, and then they'll keep going deeper. And then all of a sudden, they're going to think, wow, well, I haven't been able to speak to anybody about that for the longest time. Thank goodness.
Somebody gets it. Somebody gets me. This is
Somebody's
somebody
actually,
that
yeah,
I could
listening.
probably invest some time with because it
Yeah,
feels
yeah,
less likely I'm going to be wasting my time.
yeah. They've been heard. They've actually been able to talk about something and be listened to, actually listened to.
And this is the bit where I've get a found in engineering world, a lot of people have a bit of a problem with it. That what I've just said there, this person gets me, I'm going to invest some time with them, I want to talk more. And they'll go, but you've not told them anything about yourself. I haven't, though I have given lots of indications of what I'm like.
I,
Someone who can sit alongside them and help them do stuff, collaborate, and we'll get to this. I don't need to talk about all my massive number of officers and amount of
I've
money spent on R&D and years in the business. And
I can get to this is not a sort of a bragging right at all, but the psychology that we've just sort of been talking about briefly, I can take somebody from the very opening of that call to perhaps having a relevant qualified meeting at a stage in a couple of 3 days time or whatever, without them even knowing my name, who I'm calling on behalf of, because none of that is relevant to their world. Of course, when we do make the appointment or arrange the meeting, They then get to know my name and perhaps who I'm, of course, working
Who are you? Not
alongside. It's
telling you.
quite important.
A
But this is the whole
mysterious
thing.
sales assassin.
As a exactly, excuse me, but you have cold callers who go, "Hi, Fred, how are you? My name is Nick. I'm calling from XYZ company. This is what I can do for you today." And they go, "No, it's another cold call. Thanks, goodbye." Do.
Yeah, yeah.
This is the difference. But this is something that takes a lot of thought, a lot of experience, a lot of practice. And I certainly couldn't have done this when I started my career right back then.
I mean, to be good, to be really, really good at it, yeah, thought, experience, practice. Do you need to be really, really good at it? Do you need to be an elite level black belt ninja cold caller?
Absolutely not. No, you don't. And for anybody that might be listening to this thinking, how on earth do I get better at it? It's just a different way of thinking. It's a different mindset. It's a different attitude. But there are certain things that you can learn. There's enough of us that have been in the world making cold calls for lots and lots of decades for us to be able to impart some information that is going to speed up your learning ability to become a more effective cold caller. And if we use that word adequate, we could say that that's really the level of cold calling ability that you need to be adequate, but to understand the process and just as importantly, why it's that kind of a process.
I'd say in the world where you are responsible for the wholesale, so you are going to then go in and have the meeting, and then you're going to go away and put a proposal together, and then you're going to be putting the proposal and the presentation off the back of it, and then you're going to be negotiating the deal, which is what a lot of people in this world will be doing.
Hmm.
Just being adequate in getting that whole thing up and running is fine. It's absolutely fine. So different people in different worlds, their job is solely cold calling, and it probably does make sense for them to be as best they possibly could. But I don't think there's anything wrong in saying, no, I'm decent enough at it because I've got a couple of things that I do. I focus on them. I've got a structure. I know what the pains are, and it'll get me on second base, whatever. Happy days.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the thing is that if you're open to that understanding, it's going to serve you far better than seeing a lot of the, I suppose, the poor information out there on LinkedIn that says that you have to be an expert, you have to be a ninja. You don't. I spent a lot of my first sort of years in sales and cold calling trying to learn and find out for myself because nobody was there to be able to tell me because they all led by example because of how they were taught, which was just the same as I was being taught. As you said, that here's the product, here's the feature, we're number one, we've got lots of offices. Nowadays, thankfully, there are enough people out there to be able to say, we can shorten your learning curve and get you to a level of adequacy very quickly. But you need to be open-minded and you need to understand it's perhaps a change, as I say, a mindset and attitude.
And that, I mean, yeah, we're talking cold calling and prospecting today.
Mm.
What you've said across the board, whether that's the cold call, whether that is now the meeting, whether it is how you write a proposal and some of the tools, technique, all of these things, if you're open-minded and want to just upskill slightly, actually being adequate will probably make you better than a lot of people. Then get,
Indeed.
slightly better still, you're going to, and of course, the cumulative effect across makes you way more accomplished. And a very interesting
Absolutely.
proposition for customers because you started off making it about them, and that'll run the rest of the way through.
It's always going to be about them. And, there's this old adage, isn't there? The customer is always right. Well, no, they're not. But what we should always do is to understand that put them first, and then see what happens from there. But never put yourself as the salesperson first, because that just doesn't work. And that's where I think so many of the sales problems are that we have still in the industry in which we serve.
It just doesn't work.
No, it
That's the,
doesn't.
that's the main reason to want to get your head around this stuff. Yeah,
True.
the ethics, the morals, the principles, but it just don't work either.
No.
The industry that we serve, and that's a brilliant mindset, isn't it? To serve an industry, to serve the customer. Yeah.
Yes, to serve the customer. Put them first, understand, engage, allow them to talk, and then listen. And I mean, really, genuinely authentically listen to them.
There's your summary for the podcast. I don't need to find anything else.
There we are.
Apart from, where can people get in touch with you? I suspect people might have heard this and thought, well, you know what? Wouldn't mind taking the conversation a little further. Where do they get you?
I live on LinkedIn. So you can see I put quite a bit of content out there on a fairly regular basis. It's Nick Jeins, and that's Jeins. I've got my little smiley face, so perhaps if there's anything that you would like to speak to me about at any point, I'd be very happy to have a chat with you.
Brilliant. We will pop a link to your link to your profile.
Okay.
Here.
Thank you.
And if they mention that they heard you talking on here, that would that'll be awesome.
Well,
Nick,
Fred, thank you very much indeed for your time.
No, thank you for sharing so much with us. Really appreciate it.
Me too.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Today podcast with me, your host, Fred Copestake. I hope you've enjoyed what you heard today. If you did, please get in touch and hit subscribe. And remember, you can take the Collaborative Selling Scorecard for free to check out how your sales approach works in today's environment. You'll find it in the show notes.